So, Beau is Afraid is the new horror film from Ari Aster, who's done films like Hereditary and Midsommar. And if you've seen those films, I think like you're decently prepared for what Beau is Afraid is going to be like, but you're still going to be surprised. Like it's very much like outside of like the usual type of film that he does, specifically because this film, like it is a horror, and it is very terrifying. It's surreal, but the most interesting thing about the film is that it's a comedy. And I know that like aspects of Hereditary and Midsommar, they do have like comedic elements woven in there, but Beau is Afraid is just like, it's one of those films that's just like, it's so absurd that like it has to be funny because it's so cruel and dark with how it's trying to portray this kind of like over the top world that all dumps on this one guy, that you have to have some absurdity with it. And to its credit, the film does that wonderfully while still like keeping you guessing about where this film is going. Because like I feel like it's impossible to describe just like how weird this film is without going through it like blow by blow. Especially since there's like some huge spoilers towards the end, so I'm not going to try to do that here. I'm just going to try to like best convey how strange this film is, and I feel like that's a little bit of like a tall order because like Aster's films, like if you look at like Hereditary, Midsommar, they're already pretty weird and surreal and have like cerebral elements to it. So saying that this film is weird and surreal, I think like is not going to do it justice here. Like it's on a much higher level than those other films are. So the whole premise of the film is that you have Joaquin Phoenix playing Beau, this this kind of like middle-aged guy who's been terrified his entire life. He's always felt like, he hasn't really had any much agency. He hasn't been in control of his life, and that everything just goes wrong for him with like trauma that's been like deep-seated within him since childhood. And I love this kind of desperation that comes out of this performance from like a character who looks much older. Like Phoenix here, he's balding, he's gray, he's fat, he's out of shape, and he's got wrinkles all over his face, and he has like this helpless look about him the entire time that just, you can't help but feel bad for this guy, especially because like his problems that arise in this film, like they range from like like relatable stuff that would put you on edge to just like over the top stuff, like just exaggerating the ridiculousness of it. Kind of like an episode of The Simpsons. I say that it has a lot of relation to The Simpsons because if you're familiar with like The Simpsons and Futurama, how they'd always have like ridiculous signage in the background, there's tons of that in this film. Like Beau's world is filled with like the weirdest background sites of sex shops, and there's like a weird anti-abortion advertisement. There's like the TV dinners, if I remember correctly, it's a combination of like potatoes and pineapple, and it says like the best of Italian and it's like the best of like Irish and Hawaiian cuisine. And these are just like, and they're in the background, but there's so much like laugh out loud moments that you can't help yourself, that you're laughing at this stuff while you're feeling for this guy who's going through a lot. So the whole premise is that Beau has to go home to visit his mother on the anniversary of his father's death, who's been dead since before he was born. And he has issues about going to see his mother, and when he learns that his mother might be dead, then it becomes like all the more urgent that he's got to get out there. But everything goes wrong for him. Like, his apartment complex is a nightmare. He has problems like, getting up on time for flights. He loses track of long passages of time. And just like, there's so much for him to be afraid of in this world, because like, I feel like it'd be too easy for someone to look at like a more grounded version of this story and just say like, dude, this dude has to get over it. But no, there's tons for Beau to be afraid of in this world. There's medication that goes awry. There's therapists he can't trust. There's deadly spiders that are loose in his apartment. He doesn't have any water in his apartment. it's not just like at one point like people break into his apartment, and it feels like it's the entire block that goes in there to ruin his place. So you feel so bad for him. And as the film keeps going on, like it just gets weirder and weirder with the different people he encounters. Like at one point, he meets a couple who take him in, played by Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane, who, my goodness, Nathan Lane in this film is like that kind of like weird type of like it's not like the over the top eccentric that you'd expect from Nathan Lane, but kind of like that kind of like, you know, chipper, I'm here for you but I'm not really here for you type of sympathy, because you can tell like he wants to do the right thing but he doesn't always, and he kind of loses track of people and doesn't always have their best interest at heart. Not to mention, it was so weird hearing like Nathan Lane saying like, you know, like, you gotta get dressed, my dude. Just casually stating these kind of like dad lines, which is just bizarre. So you feel like, you know, Beau can't trust these people because, you know, they want to care for people, but they can't. So there's a lot of dangerous people that they associate with. They can't raise their kid. They have like an army veteran who they place too much faith in. They, you know, they grieve in the weirdest way. And it's just like, I know like I'm getting close to being like blow by blow, and I'm trying not to, but it's strange. Like it's one of those films that like I said, you almost have to describe it just to communicate how weird it is. I guess I'll say like the film has great passages of trying to, you know, further elaborate on Beau's situation and what is going through his mind. Like we slowly get elements of his past that come about, and a lot of his memories are like clouded. You're not quite sure if they're like nightmares or dreams. You get to see like this kind of like this longing for love, but like fearing that you're not going to be able to reciprocate it, which becomes absolutely terrifying as the rest of the film goes on, because towards the end of the film it feels like Beau is just one victory away from like, you know, changing his life and having a happy ending and, you know, everything working out for him. And just when you think like that's within reach, it's like it's pulled away. It's like for every one step that he takes forward, there's like 10 steps that send him back every time he thinks he's at that point where he's going to get some acceptance and some help, and someone will actually show him love that he doesn't have to repay like 10 times over. And especially like when you have an amazing cast. Like at one point, I won't spoil it, but Bill Hader is in this film, and it's a blink and you'll miss it moment. But just keep your eyes peeled. He plays one character in this film, and you kind of have to like peer at the screen. And it's like, wait, was that Bill Hader? There's a few other like recognizable actors in here. Like immediately, like when I heard like Richard Kine's voice over the phone, like you could tell that he was coming. You have who else? Just like an amazing assortment of Parker Posey has a great role as kind of like this love interest that Beau has been holding out for, and she has some like weird and like equal parts like weird and erotic scenes that are pretty interesting. You have Stephen Henderson, who you might know from like a few films, like, you know, like Ladybug and Dune. He shows up here in a very surprisingly sinister role. Like he always feels like that kind of like that vessel of, you know, he has like a face you can trust. And I think when you see him in this film, like it's all the more terrifying, where I feel like I want to see this guy in more horror films, like a lot more. He has an amazing presence. So just like an amazing cast, and just very, I guess the best way to like, I'm trying to find the right words to describe it. I feel like the best words might be just like experimental, just because you have no idea where this film is going. Like there's animated passages, there's fantasies that Beau gets lost within, there's thrilling elements of, you know, there's social commentary. Like at one point he's confronted by a cop. There's, like I said, there's lots of comedic elements, and the comedy bleeds into everything here. Like at one point, probably the most horrific moment in the film is a scene where like Beau is stabbed by, I'm trying to remember the exact name, but it's called like the birthday suit boy killer or whatever. It's just a naked guy running around the neighborhood stabbing people. And like he chases after Beau and like starts stabbing him, and it's horrific, but at the same time you you're kind of laughing too, because you're like, just like this naked guy with his dick out and he's stabbing people, and there's other people who are attacking him, and they're all like exaggerated people that you almost like question like if all this is in Beau's head. But thankfully I don't think that the film resorts at like making that like an easy out. I feel like if the film did that, it would rob everything of like the weirdness that's going on here, where you're feeling all the anxiety and paranoia that goes through Beau's mind through this like unorthodox journey that just gets weirder and weirder and weirder, to the point where there's a monster in the film that if I told you what the monster is, I doubt you believe me. It's one of those things that you just have to see for yourself. Yeah, but in another way, like at some point you get to a point where you're almost kind of like, okay, this is kind of like what I expected from like, you know, Aster's previous films, but then it would keep going. Even when it gets to the point where it feels like Beau's reached his destination, it feels like there's another weirder development. And just when you think like that is where the film would end, it gets weirder and weirder and weirder, to the point where there's like this very, very cathartic end to it that has the, it kind of has like the same effect of like, if you've ever seen End of Evangelion, there's a scene where just like you're watching a theater, basically like a theater room full of people, and then it's empty and it kind of like reflects on the audience. There's a similar scene like that towards the end, and it's like it's weird, like it's creepy and it's deeply unsettling, and it occurs in a very strange and bizarre place that it's just it just feels like a nightmare. It's it's a nightmare that like you can't escape from, that's exaggerated because you can tell it's trying to be a comedy, but at the same time it's a relatable type of comedy that just kind of creeps under your skin and kind of gives you like a little bit of like easement, I think, with having like the weird signage, because like it continues with everything in the film. Just when you think like you've gotten over the comedy part, there's another absurd element that will either weave itself into Beau's situation or just be in the background to see. And I like that because it adds this kind of like weird levity to it, because this is, when you get down to the bare bones of it, this is a deeply cruel film about a pitiful character who is just dumped on, and there's no hope for him in this film. No one is coming to save him. Nobody is going to give him, even like characters who seem like they are going to offer some help, that they will eventually either, you know, find a way to turn on him, or somebody else will come in and ruin everything. And so you have like this deep hopelessness over the picture. And you kind of just have to laugh at that at some point. So the fact that like Aster has all these exaggerated little elements in there to kind of like make you laugh, I think it's such a perfect mixture. Now, I feel like I have to like... I feel like I have to find some way to say this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Because, I mean, it's very surreal. It's very weird. It's not a very grounded film. It kind of goes all over the place. Like I said, like there's an animated sequence. There's fantasy sequences. It jumps all over the place that I don't think if you're not on board for like the general theme of it and the absurdity to embrace, you're probably not going to like this film. Especially for the fact that it's 3 hours long. Because I'll be honest, I love this film, but I'm going to be honest here. This film's going to piss off a lot of people. So if you like going in to see horror films that are grounded, that have like, you know, a firm arc, basically if you can stand like a David Lynch film, you could probably get through Beau's Afraid. Probably. Like I said, this is definitely Aster's most high concept film, and it is going to turn a lot of people off. And I feel like we've been seeing a lot of that trend with a lot of films, you know, like Babylon, you know, these 3-hour epics where directors who have proven themselves have been given the creative freedom to do whatever they want. And I love that Aster did it here, because I mean, I saw this film in IMAX and I still can't believe that I saw this weird, you know, surreal, cerebral trip on the IMAX screen. It's just, and the fact that like, you know, they got this amazing cast for it as well. I it blows my mind to see a film like this, and I absolutely love it. So this is definitely one of my favorite films this year, but it needs a heavy warning. If you haven't been on board for Aster's previous films and you're not willing to see him go further into the deep end of psychological horror that creeps under your skin and makes you uncomfortably laugh at moments where almost you feel like you shouldn't, this is not going to be, if you're not into that, this is not going to be your film. But if you're willing to see very weird and experimental films that are highly unpredictable, you got to see Beau is Afraid. I absolutely love this film.